Hello and welcome to my channel, In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today I want to talk about books that make me laugh. This is not coffee in my cup today, if you can believe me. It is, I forget the brand name, but it's brewed cacao beans. And it's quite delicious. It's a nice stand-in for coffee. Not that I'm giving up coffee, mind you. It's just in the afternoon and evenings. I like an alternative to regular coffee, and I often will drink decaf, but that's a nice option as well. So, the books. For my 2026 reading challenge, the prompt for February is based on the phrase life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In particular, that last part, the pursuit of happiness. The idea is to pursue your own happiness by reading a funny book. And extra bonus points, not really any points, but anyways, next level, if you want to do it, is to read a book strictly by an American author to just be in the spirit of the whole 1776 250th birthday celebration. So today I have 5 recommendations for you of funny books and authors who also happen to be American as well. Now, most of these are not books that you're going to find on the average classic American novel list. They don't necessarily come to most people's mind. A lot of people are not necessarily aware of all of these books that I'm going to mention, or if they are aware of them, they're not the sort of book that you put like on a classics list. However, my only prerequisite for this reading challenge is that the books be published prior to 1976. That means they are at least 50 years old, so they've had staying power for some time. Most of these books I'm going to mention to you are significantly older than that. So they pass the age test for being a classic. They may not be the literary great novels that are taught in school or honored with prizes or anything like that, but they still are books definitely worth your time. And what's more, they will make you laugh. So in no particular order, I'm going to begin with this one, which I have mentioned before, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about on BookTube. It kind of is a book that I think falls through the cracks, even though it is part memoir of an American experience, and it's part humor, part comedy. So it's a fun and engaging read that is Cheaper by the Dozen by Frank Gilbreth Jr. and his sister Ernestine Gilbreth Carey. Now, Frank and Ernestine were siblings in a very large family. There were 11 or 12 children, I forget exactly. And their father was an engineer. In particular, he was an efficiency expert, and he had a prolific career based on that. And he also managed his family as an efficiency expert, so that plays into the humor here. This book is really about him a lot in many ways. It's also about the whole family dynamics of being in a very large family with a father who is in the public eye. He was well known for his work in that field. And it's just very interesting. The actual book was published originally in, 1949. But the actual story takes place even earlier than that, a couple of decades prior to that, when the family was growing up, when the children were growing up with their father. And it is so funny. I read this when I was young, and many of my siblings read it as well. And because I came from a large family, I definitely identified with and related to the large family dynamics that are portrayed in this story and found it incredibly accurate. It's also just sinking funny. It will make you laugh. There are a few catchphrases and scenes in this book that my family will refer to this day, even though this was part of our family history, family culture, three decades ago, at least. But we all loved this book. We loved the antics that the kids and the family got up to, and we just found it highly humorous and amusing. And so every now and then I pull it out and recommend it. I haven't read it in a long time. I really should consider rereading it, but definitely that is an option for a funny book to read written by an American author. And there is a sequel, Bells on Their Toes. I did not enjoy that one as much, and neither did anyone else in my family, but this one is definitely worth your time. And then a book that I finished reading just recently that was ignored for the better part of a century, but in the past 20 to 30 years has experienced a bit of a revival due to the subject of it. And that is Wired Love by Ella Cheever Thayer. And Ella Cheever Thayer was, I believe, from Boston, and she wrote this book in 1879, I want to say. And immediately it was a hit. It was very popular at that time, but then it kind of disappeared because it was like, you know, your run-of-the-mill, one-hit wonder, popular romance novel. People enjoyed it. It went through several printings, but then it disappeared off the radar. But there was a resurgence in the late 20th century with the burgeoning rise of internet and internet relationships and long distance communication over the wire, so to speak, which is the subject of this book. And so people were looking for books that set precedent for this situation we were finding ourselves in towards the end of the 20th century. And this book, written towards the end of the 19th century, provided that look at what it was like at the beginning of that long distance communication. What did it look like? And to boot, this book is hilarious. I first read it 7 or 8 years ago, and I remember finding it funny and really enjoying it, but I had forgotten how funny it was. I just reread it in January and earlier this month, and it was so funny. I put little laughing emojis all over the place in this book, which is kind of how I mark like the funny scenes. There is a character in this story who is a bit of a klutz, and so there's a little bit of slapstick humor, but there's also some incredibly witty dialogue between the characters. Our main character, Natty, she occasionally has these amazing retorts to people that just knock your socks off and just make you laugh. Loved this book. It was so fun all around. It was a complete package. It was a fun story. I loved the unique characters, and the plot was great. The whole over the wire relationship aspect was interesting and unique, and the humor just tied it all up in a big bow. Very funny. Highly recommend. I do not have a copy of this book. Many of you, at least if you're my age, are familiar with the movie The Princess Bride, but it was actually a book, and it was published in 1973. So it just kind of hits our cutoff for being a classic, but it is indeed an American classic. And it is really quite funny. If you've seen the movie, you know the movie is funny. Again, there are some classic one-liners that my family will repeat to this day. So there's some nostalgia there for me as well. But it also has just a fun story. It's just fun. It's kind of like part fairy tale, part fantasy, part romance, part adventure. It's just a fun ride, The Princess Bride is. And it is quite funny, humorous, amusing, engaging, all of those things. Nowadays, it's experiencing a bit of a revival. I think it had its 50th anniversary. So I think that there's been a resurgence since then of interest in The Princess Bride. So younger generations are beginning to discover not only the movie, but the book. I was at Barnes & Noble looking for gifts for my nieces at Christmas time, and the clerk there at Barnes & Noble told me that The Princess Bride, the book itself, was experiencing a revival, and they had multiple editions and copies available for sale there in December of 2025. So it's gaining in popularity again, and for good reason. It's definitely worth the time to read. It's very funny. Some people dislike certain aspects of the romance in the book, but my opinion is you're not really meant to take anything too seriously in this book. It's just a fun ride. Take it on a very surface level, and I think that you will enjoy it. The fourth book I want to mention is a fun little gem that will not take you long at all, but you will not regret reading it ever. It's about 50-ish pages long, I think, and again, I do not have a copy of it, but it was originally written in 1904 in Kentucky by a 10-year-old girl who went to an Episcopalian boarding school, and she wrote a series of essays for her teacher on a variety of subjects. And her mother saved those essays in a scrapbook, and they were later published in 1962. So no matter which date you go by, it still fits in the parameters of this readathon. And it is a charming glimpse into life in the early 20th century in small town rural America by an average girl. Now, she was a bit precocious, to be sure. When you read her essays, or you'll know what I mean. She was definitely a bit precocious, but she also was just, your average young lady in a small town writing essays for her teacher. And it is so stinking funny, sometimes without meaning to be. Actually, in fact, I think very often not meaning to be funny. It's just hilarious because the little girl, 9 times out of 10, she hits the nail on the head without meaning to. And I think that that's what makes it really funny. She has some excellent observations about life in her small town and the people in her town that she interacts with, and her thoughts about a variety of subjects that she is writing her essays on. And it's so funny. It's called Oh Ye Jigs and Juleps by Virginia Carey Hudson. And I highly recommend, if you just want a good chuckle and that's all you want, you'll get it by reading that. The last one I want to mention is not necessarily a specific book, although I have one to show you. It's more of an author recommendation for this category. And the book I'm going to show you is The Prince and the Pauper. And I got this. You can see the 2-for-1 Walmart sticker. I got these back in the day when I was very young, and I clearly paid 50 cents for it. And I was in a phase where I was reading all kinds of Mark Twain. Mark Twain was one of the authors that I read. I kind of went like on author binges. I read everything I could by Lucy Montgomery. I read everything I could by the lady who wrote Beezus and Ramona, Beverly Cleary. I read everything I could by Beverly Cleary, and there were a couple of other authors. Mark Twain was one of them. I read quite a few. Now I was a little bit older with these ones, and it was a little bit harder to get my hands on some of them. So I have not read everything by Mark Twain. Some of his books were definitely geared more towards an adult audience. All of his books, I think, while children can read them and appreciate them, I do think that the depth that is in them is much more appropriate for adults. I think, what Mark Twain is really saying would go over the head of most children. They can just enjoy the story on the surface. But I think that these books are very valuable for adults because of their themes and what Mark Twain is saying through them, through his stories. And I think that adults actually are a better audience for his books. But for the purposes of this prompt and this readathon, the point is Mark Twain is very funny. He had a great sense of humor, and it comes through in all of his books. And The Prince and the Pauper was one of my favorites, as evidenced by the fact that I have kept it for many years. I have not read it in many years, so if I picked it up and read it again today, would I find it as amusing? Would I enjoy it as much? I really don't know. But I will say, when I was young, I enjoyed every book that I did read by him, which was Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer and The Prince and the Pauper and A Connecticut in King Arthur's Court. And I feel like there was one other one, but I don't remember at the moment what it was. So I found all of them funny. I found all of them amusing, highly enjoyed them, and I highly recommend Mark Twain. He has, in addition to those novels, he has other novels for children. He has other novels for adults. He has essays and short stories, and his humor shines through in all of them. For myself, I recently just purchased The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain, which is kind of his travel memoir of going to Europe and the Holy Land and his observations on Americans traveling abroad. And I have heard from other people that it is one of his funniest books. Of course, that's probably subjective. Not everybody might think so, but many people who have read his work say that that one is one of his funniest, if not his funniest. So that is the one. I haven't read it yet, and it's obviously geared toward adults. So I'm looking forward to revisiting Mark Twain as an adult, because it's been many years since I've read anything by him. And I'm looking forward to seeing if I still find his sense of humor as funny as I did when I was younger, and if I will enjoy his observations of traveling abroad as an American. So that's the one that I'm going to pick. And honestly, I recommend, I haven't read it all, but I would say anything by Mark Twain would definitely fit the classics prerequisite of age, and it will also fit the prompt for being funny. Even if it's not subject matter supposed to be funny, it will be funny. One exception, I will say, I do know for sure that his book about Joan of Arc is not a funny one. That one is definitely more of an academic work, is my understanding. I've not read it, but that's what I've heard. But I think pretty much any of his other books are laced with humor, and so would be a great pick for February. So there you have it, my 5 recommendations for February and The Pursuit of Happiness, and the book that I am personally going to be reading in February, at least I hope to. A little sneak peek at that. And there you have it. Please let me know in the comments if you have read any of the books I mentioned, and if you can confirm that you found them funny or not, so that other people watching and reading the comments can get a good idea of what they might be interested in. And also mention any book. It doesn't have to be by an American author, but specify in your comment if it is or not, so that people who are trying to read only American authors can know what they're looking at. And specify the book that you think is funny, that you have found funny, that is a classic. That's the only prerequisite. It has to be a classic. So drop that in the comments, and so that we can all get some more recommendations. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.